Hello. I'd like to start this lesson by thinking about things, specifically the things around you. What can you see? I'd also like you to think about the names of things, the names of people, and sort of think of a friend. What job do they have? What is their job? So, the description of things, nouns, in English can seem simple and easy. We use adjectives before the noun to give more information about it, for example. There is, however, a small but important detail that you need to use before nouns in English to add more information and to say things correctly. Unfortunately, sometimes you don't need to use this small and important detail as well, and it can be difficult to decide when to use and not to use these things. These things are called articles, and the first one we're going to look at is the indefinite article, which is a or an. We use an, of course, before a, e, I, o, u words, that's the vowel sound. And we use it in lots of different ways. The first rule we're going to look at is when the first time something is mentioned. For example, a man walks into a restaurant. In this sort of story, in this sentence, it's the first time we've seen the man, so we use a, because it's the first time it's mentioned when we're talking about something. We also use the indefinite article before singular nouns. For example, she's reading a book. That is to say, she's reading one book. We use them with jobs. I'm a teacher, not I'm teacher or I'm the teacher. I'm one of many teachers. Certain phrases in English also use the indefinite article. For example, there are a couple of problems. So in this case, a is just part of the phrase a couple of, and you just have to use it. That's the rule. So we've looked at the indefinite article, that is a and an. Now we're going to look at the different ways you can use the definite article. The definite article is the before nouns, and it's used in a number of ways. For example, when there is only one of something, it's unique. For example, the moon and the sun. For us, living on the planet Earth, there is one moon and one sun, and we use the definite article before those nouns. Also, when something has been mentioned or seen before, for example in a story, we use the. For example, a woman walked in. The woman looked angry. So as you can see, the first time we see this woman here, we use a, and the second time we use the definite article, because now we know which woman we're talking about. Geographical items use the definite article. Organizations, country names in the plural, as well as extra words. For example, the Pacific Ocean. So for seas and oceans, we use the definite article. The Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. So some countries include the sort of extra phrase before the actual country name, and often you will find the definite article there. The European Union. So this organization uses the definite article. Also, there's only one European Union, so you use the definite article in this way. So now we're going to look at some other uses of the definite article in English. For example, with superlative adjectives. It was the best pizza ever. So with those superlative adjective forms like best, worst, most, when you're using these adjective forms in a sentence, we include the definite article the, always. Some defining expressions in English use the definite article. By defining expression, an expression that sort of really explains exactly what something is. For example, the first, the last time, the only, the majority of people. All of these expressions describe quite accurately, definitely what something is. Some prepositional phrases in English need definite articles, and it's a problem if you don't have them in there. It makes your English sound very foreign. So for example, in the morning is much better than in morning. In morning means nothing. You need the definite article in there. In the afternoon, at the end, by the next day. So it's good to remember these phrases entirely and make sure you include the fact that the definite article is in there. With dates in English, we can use the definite article. For example, the 5th of May, the 24th of July. So we don't always need to use an indefinite or definite article with nouns in English. Sometimes we use no article, or we can say zero article. For example, when talking generally about people or things. For example, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Crime is going up in my area. So as we can see here, we're talking generally about men, we're not being specific, And also another rule with planets. There was no article used with planets. Women, again, in general, and again, no article used with the planet Venus. Crime. So we're not being specific about crime, we're just talking very generally about crime in my area and the fact that it's going up. We also use zero article with names of towns, cities and countries most of the time. For example, we've got the town Northampton from England, no article usage, not the Northampton or a Northampton. In the same way, the country of Japan, just Japan, not the Japan or a Japan. Before plural nouns, no article needed. So for example, I got 6 books for Christmas. Well, 6 books, not 6 the books or 6 a books. We're just being general, no article needed here because it's a plural noun. Some phrases before prepositions don't need an article. For example, I'll see you on Friday. So again, no article is needed even though it's a prepositional phrase here. With sports, for example, I play tennis and golf. So it's not the tennis or the golf, just tennis and golf. Because with sports, we don't need an article. So, in the lesson, we've been looking at nouns and how we describe nouns in English by using indefinite and definite articles, as well as zero article. By indefinite article, we mean a or an, and definite article, the, in phrases and prepositional phrases, as well as certain forms of nouns. And we've just looked at how we don't need to use articles in certain situations. Now you're going to take the exercises which follow this lesson. Good luck.